What's up, everybody? Now this video is for those of you who just opened up a 3D program and you don't really know how deep you can really go with it. Now I know sometimes the software can be pretty daunting, especially when you heard so many things about it. You heard it can do this, that, and that. This was done with this. This was done using this program. This was done using that program. And everything can be done in this program right here. And then you look at the interface and you just feel like this is just overwhelming. Well, the first thing I would do is start with the modeling tools. Like that's kind of the basic. That's where everybody starts off. You start with the modeling and then you kind of move into the other areas because you'll start to get more and more familiar with the interface, and then you will start to get more comfortable in the 3D program. Now, modeling is probably the most fun you would have in the 3D program. Now, I know that people come from have different tastes and everything. So what is fun to somebody might not be fun to somebody else. But generally, modeling is probably basic modeling, because modeling can get really hectic once you start getting into some hard surface modeling and just some advanced topology and everything. Then things can get pretty complex. And if you really want to move up there, then you eventually build into that, and you might find that you might love modeling over everything else that the 3D program has to offer. So after you've done your modeling and everything, you can move into lighting. Now this is probably the most natural step you can take into being finished with your whatever project you're working on. After you've like lit your subject and everything, you've staged your scene, then you can move into shading. And this is probably the most natural progression, because now you see how the light affects the material. But now you might want to see, okay, what do I do about the material? How do I change it? How do I get different colors and whatever? You might try to pull out of your little model that you put there to be rendered. Now, after you do a little bit of shading, now shading can be really basic, but it can get really complex. You can move into UVs and other areas that are a little bit more difficult to understand. But you can just learn how to change the color, change the material. Once you change the material, then you have something that is probably pretty satisfying to you, because you're like, whoa, that's cool. I made a table and I put this wood texture on it, you know? Now, rendering will be the next thing that you would have to move into to kind of finalize everything that you've put together in your scene. So with rendering, things can get pretty complex, especially with render times and sequences and all types of layers that you can export separately. It's basically messing with a bunch of settings, messing with the samples, messing with the resolution, messing with a bunch of samples, not samples, but messing with a bunch of settings in order to basically export your image. And if you go online and you look at other people's settings, then you can copy it. And then later on, you can start to tweak certain things to figure out how to work with it yourself. Now with rendering, you can spend a lot of time just exporting the same image. You can even export one image for hours and hours and hours, but you need to know what settings you really adjust so that you can get the file out as quickly as possible with the highest quality attached. And that is pretty much the goal of the absolute beginner. You know, he can start something and he can finish something, and then everything in between can be figured out afterwards. So rigging, effects, animation, all this can be figured out after you've kind of built your 5-step program or whatever to get your project from start to finish. Once you know how to do that, then you can kind of fill in the gaps and then progress as an artist. And this is probably the typical path of any 3D guy. This is certainly how I got into 3D. Like, I figured out how to model, then I moved right into lighting and shading, and then rendering. And afterwards, I've kind of learned to fill in the gaps. I'm still trying to figure out how to work with effects, but I'm kind of getting a hang of it. Now that I've got a more powerful computer, I can process those, or it can process those effects and everything a lot better than my little laptop. Anyway, just leave your thoughts down below, and I'll be back with some more. Bye.